Putin threatens to pull out aid for unproductive UN missions in Africa, vows reform. National Security Advisor John Bolton announced that Trump's administration's strategy for Africa, warning that U.S. will no longer support unproductive UN peacekeeping missions because they are basically mostly unproductive, as these countries are still refusing to do anything about this, and promising to advance U.S. interests on the continent. The United States will no longer discriminate assistance across entire continent because, of course, the UN wants to do what we think we do, wants to control us. Without focus or prioritization, Bolton, a former UN ambassador, said in the speech in Heritage and Foundation in Washington, D.C., and we will no longer keep and support unproductive, unsuccessful, uncountable UN peacekeeping missions. We want to do something more to show Americans that how to pay tax dollars. Well, doing UN peacekeeping missions don't really amount to anything, as there's only like 400 to 500 troops really there, and they don't not really massed up for the guerrilla militaries that are in like Congo, Central African Republic, Niger, and others. His strategy stuck on American first, a cornerstone of the administration, and Bolton promised every decision, policy, and aid will further U.S. priorities in the region, not United Nations priorities. It's funny how this guy's completely right, because we should be pursuing our own interests, not the interests of the United Nations, the same country who wants to for immigrants to every single country in the world. As a part of the strategy, he said, the administration is developing a prosperous Africa. The initiative to support U.S. investment in Africa, advance trade links in the growing African middle class to improve overall business climate in the region. Its strategy also, of course, challenged the Chinese and slight Russian influence, mostly by countries like Sudan and other countries that are Russian allies. Bolton accused of deliberately and aggressively targeting their investments in the region to gain competitive advantage over the United States. Okay, I'll stop acting like that. Bolton accused of deliberately, aggressively targeting their investments in the region to gain a competitive advantage over the United States. Okay, I just said that way because I was tired, okay? Give me a break. But Bolton focused in particular on making U.S. investment in the continent worthwhile. Critical of the status quo, he said that the Department of USAID spent around $8.7 billion in development, security, and aid to Africa. But decades of U.S. investment had not stopped Islamic terrorism gains in Western China and encouraged regional development. From now on, the United States will no longer long-standing pattern of aid without effect, assistance without accountability, and relief without reform, he said. As an example, the U.S. is currently reviewing its aid to South Sudan, which promised to give U.S. resources to a government that was led by morally bankrupt leaders and perpetrate violence in the suffering conflict to our nation. He also focused on support for peacekeeping operations run by the United Nations, where he argued that operations have a habit of freezing a conflict rather than resolving it. In particular, he noted peacekeeping forces in Western Sahara many years old had been there for 27 years, as he himself helped write the mandate in 1991 when he worked at the State Department as Assistant Secretary for International Organizations. All too often, establishing a peacekeeping force and deploying it at the end of a creative thinking at the UN, Bolton said a Q&A after speech. When President Trump and outgoing Nikki Haley had said that the U.S. will may not be considering 25% more peacekeeping budget next year, and the administration has further decreased U.S. currently pays to the United Nations for next year's budget is completed at the end of the month. In his remark, Bolton said the U.S. will only support effective and efficient operations. We will seek to streamline, reconfigure, and terminate missions to enable to meet the deadline of the United Nations. And on his remarks Thursday, Bolton said that Thursday and only effective and efficient to streamline, reconfigure, and terminate missions that are unable to meet the old mandate on facilitating lasting peace. As a part of the larger African strategy, Bolton said the administration's strategy would help African countries take control of their own economic security needs, not the United Nations. We now want more of those powers to perceive dollars for independency as we draw the line of funding that cause harm to our own interests and citizens, he said. So the United Nations has suffered a major loss there, as the United Nations states will no longer be supplying peacekeeping missions to African dictators, and instead of, and then actually doing the stuff themselves instead of doing stuff for the United Nations, which they said doesn't work. And basically, stuff that doesn't work will not work. So basically, like, sell, and subscribe. And the United Nations really is losing here in this one hard, as the United States will no longer be doing these peacekeeping missions for African countries that don't really work at all. Goodbye.